The series revolves around Jesse Custer, who is a Texan preacher in a church who meets Cassidy, an Irish guy who later turns out to be a vampire, which is a pretty fun thing, but more on that later. And then Jesse acquires the power of Genesis, which is a heavenly being, which hasn't fully been explained yet, but again, I'm assuming it will next season. Acquires the powers of a heavenly being that gives him the word of God, which they call it in the comics because it's like, it's almost like you have the word of God and something in the sermon he was doing. And then later on, like, oh, you actually do have the word of God. And basically, whatever he tells people to do, they'll do literally. So if he says, go and count every grain of sand on a beach and don't leave until you're done, they will spend the rest of their life on that beach counting the sand, individual sand grains. And that happens in the comics as well. It's a pretty fun bit. Ex-hit woman, girlfriend, they have a history, but they're not really boyfriend and girlfriend anymore. They've sort of separated for reasons unknown at this point. Am I missing anything?
No, that's pretty much it. Season 1 is just kind of an introduction to him.
Yeah.
Using these powers, he doesn't necessarily know that he has it straight away, but it's only like episode 2 or 3 where he finally figures out that he's got some power. I mean, what did you think about the show?
It was an interesting one. It was a lot slower than I expected, but we ended up at the right place, so it made the whole journey worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was definitely slow for me at the start. I voiced that several times.
Yeah.
There was a lot of build-up, I felt like, and it didn't necessarily build to anything.
Yeah, a lot of it didn't pay off for a while.
Yeah. I thought it was a lot of unnecessary moments that just weren't needed. Like the woman in the bed. I don't know what was wrong with the one who couldn't open her eyes, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand.
It didn't go anywhere. We thought when God came back at the end and showed up in that weird hologram thing, which we'll probably talk about later, because how can you not? That I thought she was going to get healed or something, which is why they brought her in it. But then obviously that didn't happen, so she seemed completely pointless. So I agree with what you mean.
Yeah, and then obviously the blast at the end.
Yeah.
Pretty much killing the town.
Yeah, all the people you grow to love over the season, they're all dead.
Yeah, so it was just a bit unnecessary.
It's like Rogue One.
Yeah, I did appreciate the sort of the main characters and how it's set up there. Like obviously Jesse.
Yeah.
Like Jesse's obviously probably from watching the show, he's obviously the main character, but he's my favorite.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you've got Cassidy. And then you've got Tulip.
Cassidy's my favorite.
Yeah, I would say those are the 3 main characters.
Yeah.
I think Dominic Cooper, isn't it, who plays?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
I think
War Howard Stark.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Obviously, I've never read the comics. This is where you kind of come in a bit, but I quite liked the choice.
I think it captured the essence of the character, although it was a very, very, very different portrayal. Because in the comics, Jesse is not an absolute arse. He's a good person that wants to do right, whereas in this he just starts mowing down a load of people with an assault rifle.
Yeah,
he just does not care. He's pretty harsh to Tulip and everything, whereas in the comics you can see he actually does care. But I think it worked more with what this show was going for, because obviously it doesn't. You're not going to engage too many casual viewers of a TV show if your character's a goody-goody two-shoes. I mean, look at like Man of Steel and stuff. I had to make him a bit darker.
Yeah.
In order to capture the interest. And so if you have someone who's always doing what's good and always doing what's right, a couple of exceptions, then it could probably be a bit stale. So I liked what they did. Looks-wise, he kind of fit. In that last episode when they had the flashback and he had his longer hair, I very much like that. I think I said that when we were watching it.
Yeah.
Very much more fit with the character and the way he looks, because it's quite an iconic look.
I felt like the darker tone with Jesse as well. It came at a weird point. Like, well, I mean, it was switching between his sort of good side. He obviously started out as a preacher, and it was we were shown flashbacks of like his past involving his dad, and what went on there.
It's a really weird way they're doing that.
Yeah,
like it's given tiny snapshots of it, which kind of works because it's like, oh, what else happened? This needs more explanation. But I feel like the way it's doing it, it's going to lead to some really wrong interpretations. I mean, look at WandaVision. When you give tiny little nuggets of information, people start to theorize and then get let down by what actually happens.
yeah.
So although you're not going to be let down by this, it's difficult to come anywhere close with a guess as to where it's going to go from what we have so far.
Yeah, I felt like the way they were doing it as well, it was like he was almost grieving.
Yeah.
But I didn't get that impression that he was grieving, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. Because minus spoilers here for the comics and probably future seasons, so I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible because obviously Danny has absolutely no idea what's going to happen. He did like his parents a lot, and he is grieving them. But I agree, you didn't get that much from this. And it's weird that there's been no real mentions of the stuff that hasn't been explained yet, whereas in the comics it's sort of like littered throughout at the start. Because I think it's volume 2, because it's in my book, it's the first 2 volumes. It's volume 2 that you get his backstory. But through volume 1, there's a couple of little references here and there. Cassidy very much is my favourite character. He's a wisecracking, lovable rogue that is completely does some terrible things. But you just can't help but love him. And he's Irish. That always helps.
Yeah. I mean, there was a big switch from Cassidy being the sort of lovable, funny character to then being a sort of savage vampire, which he obviously is a vampire, and that wasn't kind of highlighted it when he first introduced, and he was just introduced as this comedic character, and then all of a sudden he's like this creepy sort of scary guy.
Yeah. It was your reaction as well when he's first introduced on the plane, and there's all the vampire hunters that are coming from, and you just thought he was like a random psycho, and then he just starts biting into the guy's neck.
Yeah, I didn't expect like a vampire to be in this series.
Yeah.
Like honestly, I thought it was going to be a sort of show like Punisher, where you've got a preacher who has this power and he goes around like interrogating people and forcing them to like obey God, which was kind of like what happened in season 1. But
yeah, they did more of that in season 1 than they've actually done in the comics, because he's very much I need to do what's righteous and what's right, and if I go around abusing this power, then I'm no more responsible than God, and God clearly isn't responsible because he's abandoned her.
Yeah.
So there's an explanation for why he doesn't do that in the comics, but because they haven't given that explanation yet, and they're doing these sort of like, they're slowly building them up, it makes sense that they've got him going around doing like villain of the week kind of things. Oh, there's an abuser here, there's a child molester here.
Yeah.
And he using these powers on them.
I mean, Cassidy and Jesse are a good combo as well. Like,
oh yeah.
But then so I would say they're a good duo. But then you've got now set up the trio with like Tulip.
Yeah.
She was introduced quite well. I think I was confused at first what was going on when she shows up to that house and she's being hunted by guys and there's like a helicopter after her. But like then you explained that she was a ex-hit woman, so I was like, okay.
Well, I'm assuming she is in the show because it's much clearer in the comics, where the first like explanation of her character is literally her blowing the bottom jaw off a guy in a car, because obviously he was a hit, and then runs off, gets into a car which happens to be being driven by Cassidy, who she then meets. They drive off to Anvil to go and find Jesse, I think, if I'm remembering right. And they see that the church is blown up, see Jesse lying there now with Genesis, take him in, drive off and talk for a bit, and they end off in the diner, which is at the end of season 1, but is also not chronologically, like in terms of the comic, the first thing that happens, they're in the diner.
Yeah.
So hopefully there's clearer explanation of Tulip's character, because I don't think it's actually mentioned at all yet that she's a hitwoman. Like, they've kind of said and shown things, but I don't think they've actually.
It seems she's got that action like behind her.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's used sort of, well, she built a sort of, what was it, a rocket launcher out of tin cans.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah.
So she's definitely got that experience. But
Yeah.
there's definitely more that they can like explore.
Yeah.
With that
Speaking
character.
of exploring more characters, they give a lot more backstory to Saint of Killers than they have in the comics. Or at least to where I've read. For context, I've only read book 1 because I did know going into this would only focus, season 1 would only focus on the first half of the first book. So I didn't particularly rush ahead, and I didn't get too many spoilers or know too much about it. But I knew what was needed for this adaptation so far. So I haven't had much explanation on him in the comics, but obviously we've had his kind of family, his history, him being in hell, and now coming out of it. Whereas in the comics, his first appearance is, again, pretty much the end of season 1, him looking for Jesse and just absolutely mowing down guys. Like, he's super fast. Police officers have their rifles trained on him, and he's just going around spinning his gun and everything and just shooting them all. Absolute beast. We've seen a bit of that, but I have a feeling we're going to see more of that soon.
Yeah, well, I mean, Saint of Killers, like, he was kind of. That's another thing as well. The throwbacks with Jesse and his dad, and it's sort of all connected. But then we also got flashbacks to the Saint of Killers, and we obviously knew it was set in a different time period, and so that was the big question for me. Is like, how is that going to connect?
Yeah.
How is it gonna? It was the same town of Ratwater that he was sort of living in, and what obviously Jesse lives in the present. So I was wondering how like they were going to be brought together, and then this is a spoiler, but the end of, I think it was episode 9, where the two agents go down to hell, and it shows you the flashbacks again, and it all sort of pieces the puzzle, and you kind of he's stuck in a hell loop. Basically, he's in hell, and I just loved the way that scene sort of worked, and I think you said as well it would have been better if that episode ended where they request his help to kill the preacher.
Yeah. How did they end it again?
It was they were hiding the body. The
body that was a weird ordering for the ending.
Yeah, and then it went straight into episode 10, and we were confused because we didn't. Cassidy was caught by the police. We saw Jesse on the run, but we didn't see how they went from hiding the body to then being caught. I'm assuming they were just caught after that.
Yeah, I literally had to take to Reddit to find an explanation for that. That's where I found the explanation that I found. Someone was like, "Please help! I don't understand the finale of season 1."
But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a good. I wouldn't rate the show very highly, and for personal preference.
Really?
Like, I mean, it was a good show and I enjoyed it, but I like a show that kind of gets into it like near the beginning. I understand they've got to have a few episodes to kind of build it up, but I felt like the whole season was doing that, and like I'm assuming the reason they're doing that is because it's a big comic series and they want to build up this sort of world. But then if you look at like The Boys, like that's also a big comic universe.
The Boys is very, very different to the comics.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to do a review on that at some point as well.
Yeah, definitely. I've still got to finish season 2, to be honest.
So far, I'm still 1 episode in. Shamefully.
Oh well. Yeah. But yeah, like, see, look at The Boys. That is a big comic universe, and they didn't necessarily take the whole season to build up. They just got straight into it.
Yeah.
And I felt like Preacher was taking the whole season to try and get into this sort of what the comics are doing. So that's why I'm definitely looking forward to season 2. I think it's definitely picked up now, and it's more of my sort of thing. So season 2 is going to be like really good. I mean, in terms of theorizing, we know that season 2 they're going to go after God, They're going to go try and find God.
There's going to be
And
some
then-
interactions with say the killers and Jesse. There's got to be.
Yeah. Well, I feel like he's going to. Well, like I said, he's not going to necessarily be on the run. He's going to be on the run from the Saint of Killers, but he obviously doesn't know he exists. So I feel like they're going to interact at some point, and then they're going to be on a sort of wild goose chase.
See, I don't know if they're going to stick to the comics at all with the next season, because I know that they're following more closely-ish. But like I said before, when I was looking up to see if a certain character was in season 2, which is who's in the first volume, they don't seem to be in it, which is raising questions as to how closely they're going to stick to the actual plot, or whether they're going to just continue with the general idea of what happens. He's looking for God. Saint Nicholas is coming with him. Things are unraveled, but they're just doing it in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
So I know that the first volume in the comics is a serial killer that's going around cutting off body parts of people, and sending them to police and family members and stuff. And there's some pretty good twists with that.
I mean,
Book 2 is Origins of Jesse, and I do know that happens in season 3 because I've seen the cast, so that's definitely coming, and that's definitely my favourite part of the book as well so far.
Yeah, let's hope that sort of there's more blood and gore in season 2.
Yeah,
because it definitely
there's got to be.
It definitely fits the dark theme, the dark vibe going on.
Yeah,
and I felt like the sort of second half of season 1 was definitely going darker.
Yeah. I mean, it's Garth Ennis. He's known for like Preacher, The Boys. He did a run of Constantine at some point. He's done the darkest run of Punisher. You can't go light on him.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it?
So out of 10, what would you rate the season?
Ooh. Out of 10, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10.
Oh, okay. I was expecting a bit lower. I'd probably give it a 7 as well.
Okay, good. Matching.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I think if it got sort of if it took a few episodes to get into the sort of backstory and set it up, and then from there it just picked up, I would have probably give it higher, maybe an 8. But because it was so slow, I'm gonna stick with a 7. And then we'll see what season 2 is like. Maybe I might change my opinion, and maybe season 2 will be higher. I don't know.
Keep your eyes peeled for the review of season 2 coming at some point.